Hi everyone. So in today's videos, I'm going to give a short introductions about the levels of measurements in data analysis and social science. Broadly speaking, levels of measurement refers to is actually a kind of framework to classify variables, data according to the natures of the data. Um, is actually a quite essential step before we stepping into analyzing data. This is because you know uh, different kinds of data actually should be analyzed using different kinds of techniques according to the nature of the data. So figuring out the nature of data and then classifying data into different types according to the nature of data is quite essential before we analyze the data. That's why we need to figure out the level of measurement of the data you're going to analyze. Uh, so um, Broadly, we have to say we have two big um, types of data. Um, One is categorical data, categorical variables here, and the other kind is called scale variables, scale data. And Under the category of categorical variables, we have nominal variables and ordinal variables. And under the category of scale variables, we have two groups, interval variables, and the other type is ratio variables. And so I would let's just look at an examples here. So here we have exemplar data frame about some key features of five individuals. So here, the data frame, the row here is the information for each individuals. You could simply ignore the first column here. The other four columns are variables here, showing you a specific aspects of attributes for each individual, like individual's gender, educational level, preferred temperature, uh, and height. So here we see these four aspects of attributes for these five individuals. You can tell that the first two columns, gender and education level here. So we're using basically some words to tell you the information of that person's gender and education levels. So the words male, female here is actually representing uh, the two categories. And so similar here, education level. We use the group or type bachelor's, master's, high school, and PhD here. These are four types. There's a repeated masters here. Basically, we have four categories. For the first two columns, the first two variables here, the key information or the values for each variables is actually in the form of categories. So uh, these the first two columns, the first two variables here is what we call categorical variables. Basically, categorical variables classify data into distinct categories. The values for each variable are actually in the forms of categories. Under the variable gender, we have male, female, or other categories. And under the variables education levels, we have examples primary, secondary, high school, bachelor's, or whatever others categories. So the the key forms of values for these variables are category. That's why we call these kind of variables as categorical variables. On the other hand, as you could tell, the other two variables, preferred temperatures here and height, um, in each cell, there's only number. We're using simple numeric values to tell you the information of each person's preferred temperature and height. In this case, these two kind of variables could be called scale variables or quantitative variables. Um, these type of data, broadly speaking, are the kind of data that can be measured and expressed numerically. We could directly use numbers to tell you the key information of that person's favorable temperature conditions and height. So yeah, this kind of data is called scale or quantitative data or variables. Okay, let's go back to categorical variables. So under the categorical variables, if if the kind of variable is like gender, so for example, it has many categories, male, females, for example, but among those categories, there's no ranking. You can't rank like that. Like one category is above the others. One is bigger and larger than the others. There's no intrinsic order among those categories. This type of data, or variables, we could call it nominal variables. So gender here is a nominal variable. So the data can be categorized into different groups, but these group have no current order. You can't rank those groups or categories. Other examples of categorical variables include race or maybe type of cuisine. Um, so let's look at the other one, the other categorical variables here, educations. It's a kind of categorical variable. So, the key format for the values of this variable is still grouped, distinct groups or categories, like a bachelor's, master, high school. There are different groups, right? However, you could find a way to rank those categories. So the thing is, this is from perceptions, right? People who have uh, you know, completed university degree and have obtained bachelor degree would be perceived as uh, better educated than those who have only finished secondary educations. So you can rank those groups. So, for example, PhD is the highest level of educations, followed by master, then bachelor's, high school, etc., etc. So among those categories, there's a meaningful order. You can rank those categories. So these type of categorical variables, we call them um, um, ordinal variables. However, there's no magnitude of the differences. You can't quantify saying how much, what's how much is the difference between bachelor degree and master degree. There's no magnitude in it. So yeah, these nominal variables, ordinal variables, they are categorical variables. So let's look at scale variables or quantitative variables here, as we just mentioned. These variables, you can simply use numeric values to measure or express to tell you the key information of what the attributes. So the data can be measured and expressed numerically. The reason is that we have already chosen the way, um, a basic or minimum unit to measure these two type of, these two aspects of information. For example, temperature here, we have chosen to degrees Celsius to measure temperatures. We've chosen height to measure, sorry, we have chosen centimeters to measure height. In that case, um, the choice for basic unit, the minimum unit, regardless of which one you have chosen, have already set up the consistent differences. That's why you could quantify them. Uh, so, for example, 21 degrees Celsius, it's describing a warm conditions here. And the key difference between interval and ratio variables is that the value 0 for ratio variables has a meaning of absence or none. So, examples, well, let's just go back to preferred temperature here. the temperature, like for example, 24 degrees Celsius and 22 degrees Celsius. And what if we say there's a person uh, who's claiming that so this person's preferred temperature would be 0 degrees Celsius? In that case, the values will be zero, right? However, zero in that case does not refer to no temperature or the absence of temperatures. So 0 degrees Celsius does not mean an absence of temperatures. It is referring to a specific, temperature conditions. When it is approaching the 0 degrees Celsius, is the margin of the threshold. Ice is melting into water. So it is a temperature conditions. It is referring to temperature conditions. Whereas for ratio variables, uh, although the values, the information we could use numeric values to describe the information of specific attributes, right? Height, weight, or age. But in that case, um, the values, the number zero here, actually refers to nothing, absence. So you could say that for ratio variables, zero means there's a natural meaning of zero referring to absence. It's slightly controversial using this example like height, weight, but age, but you see what I mean. Um, so uh, the difference between interval and ratio variable is that for interval variables, zero does not mean absence or nothing, whereas for ratio variables, value zero actually means absence, nothing there. Right. So here is a summary of the categorization of these four types of data. If for variables for the data, we are using types, group to tell you the information of case attributes. Then this type of data we call it categorical data or categorical variables. If the groups cannot be ranked for specific variables, those category cannot be ranked. These variables is called a nominal variable. However, if those categories can be ranked, you could say if you could find if you could find a meaningful order among those categories, then the variables, the data you have is could be called as ordinal, could be seen as ordinal variables. On the other hand, if you could easily automatically use values, numerical values to describe, to tell information of the attributes, then this type of data is called scale variables or quantitative variables. For scale or quantitative variables, we have already chosen a basic unit or minimum unit to measure, to numerically measure them. And depending on the values of zero, the meaning of zero, if a variables containing a true 0 point, meaning zero actually means nothing there. And this type of variables is a ratio variable. If a variables, in that variables, zero does not refer to nothing, then it is this variable is an interval variable. A final note on the level of measurements, as you can see, we have classified data or variables into four types, right? Two big groups and then four types. And why we call it the level of measurement instead of classification of data or classification of variables. And this is because you could perceive level of measurement as an ordinal variables. This is because some kind of variables could be perceived as higher level data or higher level variables. These higher level variables, you could use, more options. There were more options for you to use to analyze them. Usually, scale variables is considered as a higher level than categorical variables. So interval and ratio variables be considered as higher level variables than nominal and ordinal variables. And when we're comparing these four types, ratio variables can be considered as the highest levels, and then come after, and then followed by interval variables, then ordinal variables. Nominal variable will be seen as the lowest level variables. And the reason is because a higher level variables can always be treated as a lower level one, but you can't do it the other way. You can't treat a lower level variables as a higher level one. So as we just mentioned in the beginning, you know, different types of data, we would have different kinds of statistical techniques to analyze them. We will introduce in the coming videos. But if there are some techniques to analyze nominal variables, for example, you could use this technique to analyze ratio variables and interval variables, ordinal variables as well. So you could use the techniques for lower level variables to analyze the higher level variables, because you can always, consider always treat the higher level variables as a lower level one. Let's show you an examples here. For example, temperature, as we just discussed, is could read as an interval variables, as scale variables. However, you see, for example, that the values 21, 24, 20, 32 here. You could also, treat 21, 24, 20 as different categories, right? So, these numeric values, you could downgrade them into category and treat preferred temperature as a categorical variables. But you can't do the other way around. You can't treat the lower level variables like gender. You can't make it into higher level variables like intervals and ratio variables. That's why we call these kind of classification of data as level of measurement. The higher level data has more options, while lower level data does not have that many options when it comes to the data and analytical techniques. I think that's the end for today's videos. Bye bye.